the mess hall kitchen. This is where soldiers would have cooked their food for themselves and for the rest of their company here at the fort in the 1840s. They would have cooked on an open hearth like this, which was the most common mode of cooking back at the time. Today I will be showing 3 examples of common meals the soldiers would have had here at the fort. A soldier's basic rations consisted of specified amounts of meat such as pork or beef, bread, rice, beans, peas, hominy, tea, and coffee were also added on there too. Other things that they would have added for more flavor would have been vinegar, salt, pepper, molasses, and sugar to mix up the bland military diet. The breakfast dish I'm going to make that would have been typical for the soldiers is a beef hash. Now, we're all very familiar with a corned beef hash. This is just regular beef, typically leftover scraps probably from dinner or supper the night before. So what you want to do is you want to put some lard or butter into a skillet like so, and then you're going to want to have pre-cooked potatoes, and you'll add some onions and then salt and pepper to taste as you're cooking. So right now I'll add in the onion. And then the cut up potatoes that I had already cooked before. And then meat, which I'll just stick all in. Cool. So now, what we're going to do is we will put the frying pan into the fire and slowly let the butter melt, and I will have a spoon. You'll notice some of the utensils I'm using happen to have very long handles. That's because when you are dealing with fire, it does get pretty hot and you can hurt yourself. There was many people who actually got hurt cooking these fires in the past, which is probably why so many people wanted stoves that we use today. So I'll kind of move this as far as I can at least. And then I'll just kind of kneel down. You do want to stand back as far as possible, and then you just kind of start mixing. What do you think? It smells good, right? It's done in about 10 minutes. The second dish I'm making here today is the beef stew. Now this takes a couple hours to cook because it's kind of a simmery dish. So I already have the potatoes in here along with some water. I have chopped up onions. You want a couple cups of onions, a couple cups of celery, and carrots. Now these weren't typical rations that the soldiers would have been given by the military. These would have probably been grown in their gardens. Each group had their own gardens here, and they were able to profit from that by enhancing their food in some way, shape, or form. So I will add this into the stew along with the beef. I'm going to take my trusty spoon and kind of give it a good mix so everything's underwater. I will be putting the stew over the fire for the next couple hours. And occasionally stirring it, and I will add some seasonings later like salt and pepper. So in this cloth, I have what is known as a blueberry duff bread. Now when I was doing research for this video, I actually saw what soldiers ate during the course of a week in 1891 in Nebraska. It's a little bit late for our time period, but the meals really didn't change throughout the 19th century. Now, trying to find a recipe for duff bread was very difficult. I found a Newfoundland duff bread recipe, and what it is steamed pudding. Now, you put the dough inside these cloths, and what you do is you basically tie it with twine So what you do is when it's wrapped in this stuff with twine all the way around it, you'll actually hang it over steaming boiling water and you'll steam it, and that's how you actually cook this stuff. What I'm going to do now is open it up, cut it up into pieces, and then you fry it in butter, and that's what they would have had for supper. Typically more sweeter things along with coffee and tea. Okay, so I still have stew going on, but let's look at the fire a little bit. You'll notice most of the flames have gone out. This is actually the ideal cooking fire right now. We've got all these red glowing coals that do most of the cooking for us. So a lot of times when you're cooking on an open hearth, sometimes you do want flames kind of for more stew type things, but when you're cooking breads, pastries, on that type, or roasting meat, you actually really want these coals because they actually do all the cooking. And you'll see me, I'm kind of spreading some of these out. The heat has just gotten like 10 times hotter. So we have the hash completed. The potatoes were kind of overcooked when I put them in there, so they kind of disintegrated as I was mixing everything up. Next to it is we have the stew. So you'll notice most of the ingredients in both these dishes are actually the same. That just kind of enhances how monotonous most of these meals were. Now, a lot of soldiers really were kind of impatient. They'd never cooked before, so a lot of them didn't take the time to learn how to cook. So your food could really kind of turn out as a mess. So even though this looks messy, I've tasted it, it's pretty good. And so your food kind of varied. Another thing that I find really interesting is the regional specialties. Now, if there was actually a cook who was pretty passionate about it, and he got his hands on certain things, he might make something that his mom made him, and it would be more like a homecoming to him. So things like jambalaya, Irish stew, something called a Welsh rabbit. It's kind of like an open-faced grilled cheese. These different items, in order to break up the monotony and kind of remind the soldiers of home, was kind of an interesting way. So these recipes make me think that a lot of soldiers who did have a passion for cooking wanted to be reminded of home. However, the reality was most soldiers didn't have the time or want to learn how to cook. A lot of times they thought that rice was really meant for invalids, or that peas and hominy were just too hard to cook, when really they just didn't let them soak long enough. It was just a mixture of unknowing what they were supposed to do and unwilling to learn. Mess halls were typically just bare tables with benches on them, and one soldier's description of it said that you could actually fit the entire barracks into one mess hall. So they'd be sitting shoulder to shoulder with a tin plate and tin cup in front of them. Now, depending on where you were, sometimes that's all you had, or you would have had iron spoons and iron knives. Now, if a company actually saved up its money enough, they could send away for china flatware. Typical features found on the table would have been simple bowls of salt and pepper and a large china bowl of coffee. Thank you so much for joining us today here at the Kitchen Mess Hall. I hope it was enlightening to see how soldiers would have made their food, what types of meals they would have had, and how they would have eaten them. Now I'm left with cleaning the dishes. I cannot wait. I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope to see you soon here at Fort Scott.